couple of minutes late. I think I'm almost 10 minutes late. Sorry about that. It's really, really cold where I am. A huge cold front has moved over again, probably the last for spring. I see there's also a pretty serious hurricane targeting the sort of New Orleans area on the anniversary of Katrina. It's called Hurricane Ida. Does anyone know what category it is at the moment? Is it 2 or 3? Anyway, I know some people that are in that sort of area, Texas and so on. You guys must take care. Well, category 4. Looks like the weather everywhere is kind of nuts. 4, yeah, that is pretty hectic. Hi Dawn, hi Rock Girl, hi Hoppin' Holly, Dean Sulik, I hope you're going to be okay there in Texas. Cindy, good to see you. Stephanie, good to see you over here as well. Angelia, hello. Teresa Moore. Timmy, someone saying hi to you. Hello. Sharon, good to see you here. True Crime Nut, you're in the right place. Ema, good to see you. Amanda Hudson, good to see you. Bria, welcome. Bria's tuning in all the way from France, so it's also midnight over there. Thanks for joining us, Bria. Sonia Stanger, good afternoon. Be Free, good to see you here. So today we're going to talk about the 10 most damning pieces of evidence in the Barry Morphew case. There may be time for a little bit of Q&A on the Summer Wells case after that. Just depends on how long it takes us to get through those 10 pieces of damning evidence. So I have prepared kind of a script, so I'm going to be referring to that. It's also kind of related to an article in the Daily Mail, but what I've done is I've arranged it into what I think is a better order of priority, and then also provided my assessment on each piece, as well as a little bit of intertextuality in terms of each particular piece of evidence. Just looking at how it played out possibly in a different case, and that'll just give us a kind of help us get a sense of perspective on a particular piece of evidence. And I'm also going to contribute 2 or 3 other pieces of evidence that I think should have been part of the list. So that's what we're going to do. As I say, we might do a little bit of Q&A on the Summer Wells case if there's time. If there isn't, we might do that tomorrow, but we'll see. Justice Jenny wants to know what's the coldest it gets there. She says, Justice Jenny's in East Tennessee. Okay. Mazoka, I'm from Wirral, near Liverpool. Okay. Judah Tapout, do you know anything about this Ohio boy? No, I don't. But I'm glad that EcuSearch have had a success. So, as I say, I'm going to be reading this kind of from a script, so I'll try to pay attention to chat as far as I can, but just bear with me. Okay, almost ready. Let's just have a look. Gigi Alight tuning in from Australia. I must say I'm quite sad that there wasn't a rugby game this weekend, Gigi, but apparently in 2 weeks or so. Suzanne Skrisky, where can I get an Intertextuality t-shirt? If you Google TCRS merch and possibly Teespring, but it might be enough. You can also Google TCRS merch, the Intertextuality range might come up. Otherwise, I'll leave a link in the description. I'm not sure whether Stephanie will source that, but maybe one of the mods can. Sonia Stanger from Washington State. Victoria, oh, you here from the UK. Donald Duck from Utah. Suzanne from Stockholm, Sweden. Okay, I think we had about 300. I think we can get going. Oh, thanks very much. Sharon has put up a link to Teespring. If you just Google TCRS merch, I think it is perhaps on that link. So thanks a lot, Sharon. Okay, let's get started. So the fact that law enforcement took an entire year to bring charges against Barry Morphew, I think suggests that they themselves felt that they didn't have enough. So if they felt that they had enough in the first month, they would have brought charges, but they didn't. If they felt they'd had enough after 6 months, they would have brought charges. There was also the case that there was a change in district attorney, so that may have had a impact. We know in the John Benet Ramsey case, if you had a different district attorney, you could potentially have had a different style and strategy and set of standards. Some district attorneys are more litigious than others. Some district attorneys are more, cautious than others. And so it was shortly after there was a change in district attorney that this happened. But I think the other side is if there was really strong evidence earlier, there would have been charges earlier. It just would have naturally worked that way. So it does feel like the prosecution didn't feel like they had enough. In any event, the Daily Mail has compiled a list, but are those 10 pieces of evidence going to cut it? And I'll put a link to that article in the description once I've done with this. As I said, I've taken the Daily Mail's list of 10 most damning pieces of evidence, but I've rearranged them in the order of priority that I think is more apt. So for me, the most important, the most damning piece of evidence is the scratches. It's not just the kind of scratches, but it's also the fact that they were fresh scratches, the fact that they were, it seems as though they were inflicted very close to the incident, right? And you can't sort of blame something like a dog or a cat or even Barry's daughters because they weren't there then. So you've got to ask, how did Barry get these scratches, right? So I think what this also reveals is an unfortunate lack of, I don't know if the word is urgency or attention from law enforcement, but I think if I understand correctly, it was only 3 days after the incident. So I think around about the 13th of May last year, Barry was formally interviewed and photographed. So it was only when he's photographed 3 days after Mother's Day that they sort of seemed to notice that he had fresh wounds. Now, bear in mind, they may not have been noticeable, how can I put it, with his on. I don't think they would have been noticeable. You would have had to say to him, okay, we need you to remove your shirt, as they did with Chris Watts. And that's kind of I won't say an awkward step by law enforcement, but it's certainly a step, right? And I think about it, law enforcement aren't going to ask anyone to remove their shirts. Can you remove your shirt? Can you? It tends to be someone where they've, got reason to believe that they need to ask that question, if that makes sense. So what happened was Undersheriff Andy Rorich described these barely healed wounds on both of Barry's arms, and he described them as cuts, but sort of semicircular, kind of like half moon. And in his opinion, they were fingernail marks. Now, if that's true, it could be very significant. It could also be that they were inflicted on May 8th. So when somebody says that they were fresh, it's kind of subjective. And if I was a defense lawyer, and I don't really want to play devil's advocate, but if I was a defense lawyer, I would say, well, how do you define fresh? Fresh could be 1 day or 2 days. But I think what it appears is that it was fresh in the sense that weren't these inflicted, on, say, May 9th. The point is that they hadn't healed. And what is quite interesting with fingernail wounds, I don't know if you've ever, received them or had them inflicted on you, they can be not only quite painful, but they can take a while to heal. Whether you've been scratched by a cat, I think it's because of a combination of the dirt on the fingernail and the kind of cut into the skin that occurs. So my assessment of the scratches is that unfortunately we can't evaluate them. Unfortunately, we haven't seen photos of them. So it's difficult to quantify the importance. We've kind of got to rely on the undersheriff's testimony and his standards. But you've also got to bear in mind that it was Barry's job and lifestyle. Just have a look at this dog. He always seems to enjoy lives because he gets to have a very comfortable snooze. You get Madonna and Child, well, there's also something like that, and Timmy. Okay, so if you bear in mind the nature of Barry's job and lifestyle, we'd expect some kind of abrasions. You'd expect some sort of cuts and bruises here and there. Bear in mind he works kind of, I won't say in the construction industry, but it's sort of the same thing. Lifting heavy things, very physical, mechanical kind of work. But you wouldn't expect the area of these injuries to be where they were. You'd expect someone to get, someone who works, let's say, in the construction industry to hurt their knuckles and their fingertips, banging in nails, that sort of area, or their feet, something landing on their feet kind of thing. The upper arm is odd for that. And I do think the upper arm conjures a predator and prey scenario. If you imagine Suzanne going like this, her hand and arm stretched out to its full length, trying to push away someone who's pursuing her, right? Then, and the other person who's pursuing her doing the same thing, trying to get his hands on her. You can see a scenario where an upper arm scenario could happen. Both people got their arms stretched out. Well, where are your nails going to end up at? If you think about it like that. So I also just want to stress that everyone is innocent until proven guilty, and Barry's on trial right now. What we're trying to assess here is get some perspective on the charges. So, but let's just bear in mind, in terms of the law, the eyes of the law, people are innocent until proven guilty. So we're just sort of speculating on what this evidence could mean. To some extent from a prosecutor's perspective, to some extent from the defense case. So all I'm saying is the scratches could be interpreted as Suzanne possibly fighting off her attacker, right? It's not a lot of damage that she inflicts. I don't know if she had that much time before a possible sedative could have taken effect. But True Crime Nut says the change in the DA in the Morphew case was used. Does feel like that. It's also possible that her attacker could have straddled her. You can also have a situation where someone's lying on their back and pushing out like that, trying to push the person away. So, and then managing to score on an injury on the upper arm kind of thing. So it implies that her attacker could have straddled her or engaged her with his hands. And that's one interpretation. I'm going to give you guys another interpretation a little bit later on. It's also possible that Suzanne successfully fended off her attacker, which then led to an escalation. It led to something that the attacker felt needed to be more effective. And we'll get to that a little bit later as we go down this list. I've also written here the bedroom assault, if that's what happened. It does feel like this could have taken place possibly in the bedroom. And I'll get to why I say that as well. But if that is what happened, it suggests Suzanne used her limited time to execute an exit strategy. So her idea wasn't necessarily to fight, to defend herself, it was to flee. But then someone pursued her, and then when she considered herself trapped, that was when she kind of had no choice and she had to fend this person off. It is also possible, you've got to think about this both from the perspective, but also from the perspective of almost general victimology. Heather, whatever, thanks very much for that. In other words, what would a reasonable person do in a situation? And so I think one of the things you can ask is, wouldn't if someone in a situation of an emergency rush to get to their phone, right? Now, there's a problem with that is even if you manage to win the race to your phone, you now need a few moments to, Huda Ali, thanks very much. Love the way you investigate. Love your analyzing of the McCanns. Yeah, the fact that it was an isolated site, absolutely. Raymond, thank you as well. Raymond, I hope you're staying safe. So even if she manages to get hold of her phone, she needs a few moments to be calm and still to activate the phone, to dial the numbers, to wait for an answer and all that kind of thing. And in the context of a crime that is escalating, that is taking place, that is actually unraveling, that can feel like an eternity. Those couple of seconds are critical. And so what you'd want to do in a situation like that is get yourself into a safe place. So, for example, into a room, close the door, lock the door, and then within that safe zone, you have the potential opportunity to make a call uninterrupted. Of course, that is also going to shoot up the urgency and emergency level for the perpetrator who's going to absolutely want to and need to prevent that. And so what are they going to direct their anger and attention to? Well, it's the barrier between them and the other person, the door. And so that's why I also think the door in this case is very significant evidence, more significant, I think, than the Daily Mail. I don't know if the Daily Mail prioritized this, but I would have mentioned it a lot earlier. It is also quite intertextual to the Oscar Pistorius case, if you guys are familiar with that. I don't know how many people know that there were actually two very badly damaged doors in that case. You also had, I believe, a scenario where Reva was fleeing Oscar and they first had a kind of an altercation, a contest, also at the bedroom door. That bedroom door was also damaged, wasn't really mentioned much at trial. And then the second one was at the bathroom door. And as I say, you had an escalation there where it started with a certain amount of confrontation and then went even higher up that level with, arming oneself, and we know what the outcome was there. So in terms of the intertextuality of the scratches, I think it's something that we can compare to the welt on Chris Watts's neck. And I think what's quite interesting with that is the welt on Chris Watts's neck was sort of neither here nor there. He said it could have been a mosquito bite. Victoria said, I wish Suzanne had just left him to be happier somewhere else. Yeah, there are so many cases where this happens. In fact, in the Oscar Pistorius Reeva Steenkamp case as well, she had experienced his temper. She'd experienced him being controlling and unreasonable. She'd actually said, I'm afraid. So you actually have quite a few situations where the victim ends up the way they do. Actually knew before the time that this person's either unstable or potentially violent or whatever. And then they persist, that they stay in the relationship regardless. You kind of get the sense that they wait, that they're timing their exit, that they're waiting for something. They're waiting for perhaps confidence or courage to leave. And in that period is when this happens. So it tends not to be that they're unaware. Even Shanann said, I don't feel safe with him. I want to stay in North Carolina, right? And her instincts were accurate. The thing that I think we need to recognize in true crime is, first of all, knowing what those red flags are. Not, oh, this person's a narcissist, so leave your husband, or, oh, this person did X or Y. It's when it crosses that line where you actually feel, you don't feel safe. And and also the need to keep secrets and the need to keep up pretenses. All those things can factor into it. But the other side of it is all of these victims were people who knew something about what was going on. They had reason to feel uncomfortable with what was going on, but they failed to act in time. And I'm certainly not blaming them for that. I'm simply saying we as survivors, we as people who remain behind can look at that situation and say, perhaps you should leave sooner than later, kind of thing. So anyway, back to the Barry Morphew case. What do you guys think? Do you think the potential fingernail wounds that appear to be fresh, do you think that is better evidence of some kind of struggle than the welt on Chris Watts' neck? Do you think that is better or stronger evidence than that sort of kind of a welt? Some people, I've heard all along people saying, no, that wasn't made by a fingernail or by a finger, right? Well, then how do you think it was inflicted? I believe it was, but I don't think it was a very clean cut. I think it was, my impression was that Shanann was attacked from behind, so it would be difficult to score a clean kind of injury, right? So a lot of you are saying stronger. I agree with that. But it's quite important to contrast the two in order to say, well, so this is actually stronger evidence than in that case, and we know what the outcome was in that case, right? So that's the first point to make. The second one is the missing 15 minutes. Now, I think whenever you have someone says chipmunk bite, yeah, it depends. That's quite a good point. His teeth can also make those kind of half moon incisions. So one would actually want to look at Suzanne's fingernails, and one would also want to look at something like the teeth of certain animals. Of course, if your incisions are like this, separated, or they're like that, almost the way teeth are, that's going to make a difference, right? The second, I think, most important piece of evidence that I think is quite damning potentially are the missing 15 minutes. In any case, a problem with your timeline, you either have an alibi or there's basically there's a reasonable explanation for where you were and what you were doing, or you don't. And often there is a reasonable explanation. You were far away, you were on your phone, you were on your computer, you were talking to a person, you were shopping. It's a reasonable explanation. Or, what were you doing? Well, I was sleeping. Oh. Did anyone see you sleeping? No. Oh, you weren't on your phone? No. Because if you're on your phone or on your computer, there are going to be timestamps there logging your activity, right? So that can also be used to kind of exonerate you, right? A witness is not always a witness either, but often they don't have a horse in the race. So, a witness that knows nothing about the victim wouldn't necessarily have a horse in the race. Sometimes they do, though. I mean, in the Amanda Knox case, did Raffaele's solicitor have a horse in the race? Well, the moment he actually said, you know what, Amanda wasn't with me the whole night, he lost his alibi as well, because she was his alibi. So you had that weird thing taking place. So for me, the time is very, very important. If you can't account for your movements at a critical period, then why not? What's going on? It's not enough on its own. Just like I think it's important to stress this. The fingernails on their own, if it is that, those injuries on Barry's shoulder on their own isn't enough. It's not, you couldn't take that alone and try and charge and prosecute Barry, right? Just for the fingernails on their own. It's not enough. The same applies with these missing 15 minutes. The missing 15 minutes is serious, but it's not enough on its own. So according to the article, quote, on the morning of May 10th, data from Barry's truck shows the door was opened 7 times between 3:25 a.m. and 3:49 a.m. That's quite a lot of activity very early in the morning, close to 3:30 in the morning, right? 7 times. When last did you open your car door 7 times at that time of the morning? Have you ever? If you had to ask me, I do sometimes go out, maybe not since lockdowns and curfews, but I would sometimes be working really late at night, sometimes writing a book or something, and then I just want to go out to, not that I necessarily need to buy milk or something, but I just need to get out, even if it's that time. But I certainly wouldn't go in and out 7 times. I'm not that forgetful. So what is going on with the 7 times? And so Barry's got to answer that question. What were you doing? And he might say, I don't know. Or he might say, maybe it was Suzanne. Maybe she was checking his truck for something, looking for a spy pen. I don't know. Now, I think you'll agree with me that in the same way that the location and the possible type of injuries to Barry's arm are quite suspicious. It's not like a stubbed toe. The time of these 15 minutes between 3 and 4 a.m. is hugely suspicious. Yuda Ali says Barry must have gone into rage and jealousy. I often hear that. Like Chris Watts committed his crime of rage. Oscar Pistorius, it was it was an act of rage, and I don't know if I see it that way. I'm not saying anger is absent from the emotional fabric, but I do wonder whether it's not fear that is driving someone. Sometimes people are more driven by fear than they are by anger. If you think about the coronavirus, a lot of people are behaving the way they are out of fear, not anger. There is an element of anger, for example, I don't want to wear a mask or whatever, but there's also fear. So in terms of Oscar Pistorius, I think the fear was that there was something on his phone that possibly Reaver found, and he was about to get a couple of huge sponsorships, multi-million-dollar sponsorships, kind of signed off, and he was about to embark on the next season, the next chapter of his career that could have been jeopardized, right? By a girlfriend who was now aggrieved and all sorts of other things. In the Chris Watts case, I think Chris Watts was afraid of what Shanann would do if she found out about the affair, and she was finding out about it. So I think he was afraid of Shanann, right? And that is the operative emotion, not anger. Was there anger between him and her? Oh, definitely. There definitely was. But what was actually driving? So you must bear in mind, when a man commits a crime, it tends to be out of weakness. He can't resolve things in a civil way, in a proper way, in a decent way, in a socially acceptable way. And so because somehow he finds himself inadequately, what's the word? He just doesn't know how to deal with the situation. He cheats. He tries to sort of force a fix, and so so fear is often the reason why these harsh, or it's not harsh, isn't the word. It's just sort of a rash, it's a rash action to take, and I think there is anger, but I think fear of losing control and all these sort of things. Anyway, back to the missing 15 minutes. I think the total time spent loading things into his truck, and I find this fascinating. If you just do a YouTube video on the fly, I don't know if you have the presence of mind or the time to go and calculate this. The only reason I was able to do this was I wrote down the script almost like a chapter. And so I went and did the trouble just to compare Barry's sort of nocturnal driveway thing to Chris Watts's. And so with between 3:25 and 3:49, right, early on the morning of Mother's Day, May 10th, compare that to Chris Watts on the morning of Monday morning, August 13th, between 5:18 a.m. and 5:45, right? And it's almost a similar length of time. The one is 27 minutes, the other one is 24 minutes. And if you compare that, you could, I think, to some extent, reasonably argue that the length of time it would take someone at home to load someone who's not conscious into their vehicle, right? And they're going to remember all sorts of things. Oh, I need plastic bags. Oh, I need to get rid of clothing. Oh, I need to wipe that down. Oh, I need this. Oh, I need that. Because it's not something we do every day. And so that may prompt several more trips inside the home and also to the vehicle. you can also count how many times Chris Watts opened the doors of his vehicle. I'm not saying it's 7 times, but it might be quite a similar amount of times to the Barry Morphew case and vice versa, right? So just to go back to the article, it says here, quote, at 5 a.m. the truck left the Morphew home and was picked up on camera in Pontius Springs at 5:14 a.m. as he drove to Broomfield for a job. So 5:14 and 5:15 is about the same time Chris Watts was he started his thing. Barry got an even earlier start on a Sunday. Is that odd behavior? Is it odd to be up at 5 in the morning preparing for a job on a Sunday when, it's actually illegal to work on a Sunday? Not just, what's the word? Unusual. It's actually not legal, not really allowed to do that sort of work. Barry admitted in an interview that he first made a detour that took him close to the remote Garfield mine after allegedly seeing a herd of elk. Police believe he was doing something else. So Barry took this trip of 15 minutes, and that is the missing 15 minutes. What was he doing during that drive? And I think some people have gone to look in the Garfield mine. There was actually recently a kind of an FBI search going on on a pass. I think it's called the Berthoud Pass or something. Some people thought that was related to the Morphew case. It wasn't, but it did make me wonder what route Barry took to go to Broomfield. Because he needs to go in that direction, but he doesn't necessarily need to take one specific route. He could have taken another route, which then really complicates the search area. In any event, that 15 minutes is quite problematic. And when Barry says that he was something about an elk or a deer, I think you've got to at least wonder, is he actually talking about Suzanne? So whenever Barry mentions a deer, and we'll get to that, doing something with a deer, doing something with elk, is actually Suzanne, right? Is the deer or the elk or the chipmunk a proxy for Suzanne? Is worth mentioning. In the Laurie Vallow case, Chad Daybell said he'd shot a raccoon on the same day that one of the children were, I think, buried on his property. I say that under correct. I think that is how it works out. But the question then being, is that statement symbolic of something darker? Is the raccoon in the place of someone? So my assessment is that the Suzanne is the herd of elk. Suzanne is the deer. In terms of intertextuality, as I said, in the Chris Watts case, the Trinastich video commences between 5:18 and 5:45 for a total of 27 minutes. Barry spends 24 minutes loading things into his truck. It's very similar, isn't it? Sorry, in the Patrick Frazee case, Frazee actually spoke about feeding the cows when he was likely disposing of Kelsey Bereth or moving things around. So whenever his movements weren't accounted for, he was feeding the cows. I have the tranquilizer dart as the third most damning piece of evidence. Not number one. I have the scratches as number one. And you could definitely make the argument that the tranquilizer dart is number one, definitely. The notion of a tranquilizer dart as a sedative could explain why the neighbors didn't hear any noises on Sunday, May 10th. No shots ringing out. You might say, he's far away, you wouldn't have heard anything anyway. It's not necessarily the case. When you have natural surroundings, then sounds travel further and better. There's no sort of interference. There's no traffic noise. There's no airplanes flying over. There's no construction noises going on. There's just sort of the sound of a breeze moving through the trees kind of thing, if anything. A few birds tweeting here and there, right? Of course, to know that for sure, you would need to do a test. You would need to fire off something and then see whether, you could hear something from the neighbor. And that was the case with the Chris Watts case. The Oscar Pistorius case, where they did those tests and the neighbors could hear bangs and they could also hear screams, kind of thing. But let's assume that it's a similar scenario in a way to the Chris Watts case, that there were no shots ringing out early in the morning. Bear in mind, it feels like this happened early in the morning. I'm not convinced that it did. I've got an idea that the actual crime took place on the afternoon of May 9th, fairly early in the afternoon, like 4, fairly early in the afternoon, right? I could be wrong about that, but I've got a couple of reasons to say that. Anyway, I think the crime took place early-ish in the afternoon of May 9th, but the moving Suzanne happened first thing in the morning. So, it's not necessarily a question of why were there no shots or screams on the Sunday. The question could also be the Saturday. That's quite important to bear in mind. It also potentially describes how and why Suzanne possibly scored those fingernail injuries. In other words, the fact, if you accept that there weren't shots and there weren't screams, that explain why you would have fingernail injuries. You might say, why would there not be a scream if there's fingernail injuries? Well, hand over mouth, right? And if there's hand over mouth, what are you going to be doing with your free hand, right? So the reality is, if shot, Suzanne could well have screamed. I'm talking about with a tranquilizer dart. She could well have screamed, and this may have prompted her attacker to silence her sooner than the sedative would. So in other words, you may have, in a way, dumbly confused the idea of shooting a deer, and the deer is shot, and then sort of maybe knows that it's shot, or maybe it doesn't, talking about with a dart, but doesn't really say anything. A deer is not going to scream out when it gets shot with a tranquilizer. Most animals wouldn't. But this is a human being. A human being in this situation is probably going to be really alarmed. I can imagine Suzanne being very alarmed, and she may then have screamed, and this may have really concerned her attacker. And you can't just wait for the sedative to take effect. You better silence this situation as soon as possible, or you're gonna get yourself into trouble. Isn't that what the perpetrator thought? So he can't just wait for the sedative to take effect. He's now going to actually have to do what he didn't really want to do, which is be hands-on, intervene, confront, have this one-on-one wrestling match, right? It's also possible that if Suzanne was shot with a dart, and I think it's, and this will probably come out at trial if there is a trial, the mechanism of these tranquilizer darts, can you actually inject someone with that serum without the gun working? As far as I know, you can't, but there might be some argument and counter-argument along that line. But let's just assume that was the mechanism, whether it was shot or done, directly. I think if she was shot, she may have elected to save her breath. She may have known what was coming, almost like if you know you're about to go underwater for an extended period, you won't shout out just before that because you know you're going to need your resources. So she may have thought, I'm going to save my breath and run for my life. I'm going to save my breath because no one can hear me or save me. So I'm going to race to get to my phone. That is what's going to save me. If I can get to my phone and make a call, then it's going to take the wind out of this attack. And that's going to save my life. So in her mind, the finish line, the summit of her personal Everest in that situation may have been get to your phone, call 911, whatever. And bear in mind, I think that same day, I say this under correction, but didn't she text Melinda that same day to say certain things about the situation? Wasn't that May 9th? Or was it May 8th? Anyway, it was one of the last texts that she sent, and I think the last text certainly that Melinda got. Let me just look at chat here because I would be quite interested to see. Oh, Friday night, the 8th. Thanks, Kit. May 8th, yeah. I was going to say, it to me wouldn't really make sense for that to be May 9th, just because I'm getting a sense that Suzanne, it had already happened by then, that she was no longer alive after sunset on May 9th. That's how it's starting to look. Someone says, or injected. Yeah, that's also possible. It's also possible. Stacey says, personally, I'd be on a plane ASAP. Good to see you here, Stacey, as well. Sharon asked a really good question. If you know no one is within hearing range, do you scream? I think some of screaming is instinctual, but if how can I put it? If the attack is to some extent so strategic, then there may be an intellectual interpretation of it. If you know what I mean. If you imagine two sharpshooters, right? There's a sort of an intellectual appreciation of imminent danger. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. It's a little bit different to if you're in a knife fight directly with someone where you don't really have time to think or reason. It's more direct, but in a sharpshooter scenario, it can take quite a long time. There can be a length of time that you're in imminent danger, and so you have time to, although it's an emergency situation, you have time to reason. And in a sedative scenario, it's almost between those two. Let's just have a look. Hop and Holly, did he have security cameras anywhere? As far as I know, there were security cameras in the house that had been installed by the previous occupants, but were disconnected. And then I think the DNA they found on the wires were not absolutely conclusive. And apparently Barry said something like, I can bet you $30,000 or something quite emphatic that's going to be her DNA or something like that. Barry's story was that one of his stories was that Suzanne took the money and left, took the money and ran. So perhaps she disconnected the cameras so that no one would know or something, so that she could live her life and live happily ever after, and no one would find her. She didn't want Barry to find her. She didn't want anyone to find her, kind of thing. So, yeah, Barry equates everything with money. 70,000, that's right. I don't know. I don't want to repeat myself, but the amount that Patrick Frazee borrowed from the bank that was about to mature was something like the same amount, something like $72,000. So in terms of the tranquilizer dart, the question is, would she have screamed? Could she have screamed? Did she elect to save her breath? You could have a situation where someone is directly in front of her, and instead of using something like chloroform or some kind of rag or whatever, it's a strangling scenario with a sedative. In other words, you making sure that your chance of winning this wrestling match is going to be better, right? So it's not necessarily I'm going to sit over here and tranquilize you and fold my arms and just wait. Could actually be you're using that tranquilizer dart as a to improve your own odds. You are intending to have this wrestling match. You are intending to be hands-on all along, but you want to craftily make the encounter very much in your favor. It's a strategic move kind of thing. And I think what's probably worth mentioning, and I mentioned something along these lines in the previous video I did on the sermon in the forest, is Barry is a sports person, and he's got that kind of, he's a baseball player. So I think he's got that kind of sports strategy. And when you apply that in other areas, for example, hunting, things like stealth, things like speed, things like outwitting and all that kind of thing. And so could some of that psychology be applied in terms of criminal psychology in a premeditated scenario? So the fact is, help was very far away from Suzanne, even if someone did hear her. So in a weird way, and this is why the tranquilizer dart is at number 3, in a weird way, although it addresses certain things, it also raises other questions. And raising questions is always good for the defense, to say, we don't actually know what happened. That could have happened, could have been that, could have been this. So the TCRS assessment on the tranquilizer dart is, because there are no human remains and no autopsy, it's difficult to ground any of these conjectures in evidence. And so as strong as this evidence potentially is, where does it ultimately take us? What does it ultimately mean? In terms of intertextuality, Shanann Watts also didn't scream audibly. In order for that to happen, the crime needs to be executed in stealth mode, and stealth tends to involve stalking and premeditation. That brings us to number 4, the damaged bedroom door. And I think the damaged bedroom door could easily be number 3. The reason I've made it number 4 is just because a damaged bedroom door isn't the same as a murder weapon or a weapon that is used, part of that. A damaged bedroom door could be damaged in a somewhat innocent way, right? So I'm just saying, the dart is a little bit closer to pointing to criminal behavior, a criminal act, criminal action, whereas a damaged bedroom door could, but it's not necessarily that. For example, do you have a damaged bedroom door in your bedroom? Some people do. Again, the critical part here is that it was damaged around the time of this incident, just like those shoulder injuries seem to be fresh. So I think it's important to note that the damage to the bedroom door seems to be new. This is something that you'd imagine Mallory or Macy would know something about. And a lot of this stuff makes you wonder, are they thinking about the case? Do they have any thoughts about the case? Do they know about the damaged bedroom door? What do they think about it? Or do they think, well, maybe their parents had an argument, and it was simply through that. And then perhaps Suzanne ran away, or Suzanne hurt Barry, or I don't know. But you just wonder what they may think about some of this. I do think that it suggests something happened in the bedroom, so it locates the incident potentially. If the case goes to trial, I think someone is going to need to be asked and answer, when was this door damaged, and who could potentially know the answer to that. So you could perhaps rely on footage from the inside of the home. I don't know when last the neighbor was there. Barry might say, actually, yeah, it was damaged, but the day before, not that day. So that's quite a simple thing to think about, but how do you prove it? How do you prove that when that door was damaged? Would Mallory and Macy say in court, would they testify? And if they did testify, would they say, before we left on the weekend, the door wasn't damaged, kind of thing? Huda Ali says, wasn't Maya Millet's door damaged too? Damaged doors are another thing that you sometimes get in true crime. There's also a locked door in the Amanda Knox case. There's some evidence on that door as well. There's also damaged door, front door in the Amanda Knox case. There's also a broken door in the Nora Corrin case. There's also an open door, doors open in the Madeleine McCann case. In the John Monet Ramsey case, obviously a broken window, but think about the door that doesn't quite work in the wine cellar of the John Monet Ramsey case. Doors that don't work, right? Doors that are damaged. Doors are meant to protect people. A door opens, but a door can be used as kind of armor. And so if the door's damaged, what does that mean? It tends to mean that there's some kind of injury taking place, woundedness, malevolence going on inside the home. Roerich testified that he thought the cracked door had been battered down. It was something comparable to what he'd encountered elsewhere as a cop. That's quite important to stress, that it's not just there's a little bit of damage here and there. It's battered. The door has taken a beating, right? And that is a proxy for the person taking a beating, potentially. For example, in the Oscar Pistorius case, that door took a beating. Oscar didn't just shoot through the door, he smashed down that door. And what does that say about the temperament of the person doing that? IRS assessment of the damaged door is as follows. This is arguably the best direct evidence that something violent and unusual happened inside the home, if you can prove that it happened close to the time of the incident. If you can't, then it falls away as evidence. I also think, this is my personal opinion, that Macy's messed up bedroom into misdirect not only away from the door, but from the master bedroom. So it's just an idea. The fact that the door is damaged, if it is important evidence, you may have the messed up bed saying, hey, look over there, look in that room. That is where we need to focus our attention. In other words, that's worse than a damaged door, but is it? Was it? I think the fact that this confrontation occurred at the door of the master bedroom, potential confrontation, indicates who the likelier candidates were for that confrontation. There's also some symbolism in this, Suzanne possibly hiding in the bedroom and someone trying to force his way in. That's from the outside. Symbolically, Suzanne also wants to get out of the bedroom she shares with Barry, possibly, and the house, but Barry wants to keep her there, perhaps as a coerced her into staying for some time. Remember him threatening to take his life. I think it was a couple of days earlier. So was Barry, just in the larger scheme of things, in terms of the marriage, controlling the exits? And so this was a physical manifestation of a lot of that drama and trauma. Is now Suzanne is trying to escape for real, trying to escape with her life, and someone's controlling the exits. Look, I'm just saying this was possibly a physical manifestation of something that was kind of taking place anyway, but in a symbolic way. You might say to someone, I'm done with this marriage, I'm done with this relationship. And then someone may say to you, I'm not going to let you get rid of me, or I'm not going to, you can't leave me. Now someone saying that's symbolic. What does it mean? You can't leave me. Well, it's symbolic. I'm not going to let you go. It's only when you do something that's the manifestation of that symbolic statement, if that makes sense. So this raises the question, was Barry controlling the exits in a general way? And then in terms of this incident, was there controlling of exits and forcing the outcome that was needed? In other words, I can't let you leave. I've got to stay in control, kind of thing. In terms of intertextuality, this is really interesting. So if you speculate in a certain area, you can anchor it into the true crime fabric intertextually, and if you can, and the extent that you can, and the extent that the other aspects align, that can give you a sense of confidence that your speculation is possibly, it's anchored in the reality of another case. But if a lot of the mechanisms are the same, then what is the likelihood that it is authentic, that it is accurate, that it is relevant, that it is real? When you anchor it in the reality of another case, you're basically saying what I'm talking about did happen in that, so could it have happened in this case? That's really what you're doing. So in the Oscar Pistorius case, there were two badly damaged doors, the bedroom door and the bathroom door. What appears to have happened is the victim, Reva, lost the battle with the bedroom door and then lost the second battle when she was shot 4 times with the bathroom door. Throughout this altercation, her escalating screams were heard by 5 neighbors, including 2 couples. If the same scenario played out with Suzanne, she would have had far less time than Reva did, if you bring into the scenario the tranquilizer dart. And now we're going to go to deleted texts. So I think this is the area of potential cover-up, right? So the first 4 or 5 of these most damning pieces of evidence, question mark, are kind of integral to a potential crime scene and kind of part of the events as they are playing out, if that makes sense. Where we're going into now is after the fact, to some extent, and showing potential signs of a cover-up. So one of the big signs are deleted texts, right? Now, this is a quote from the article, quote, Barry admitted to deleting texts on his phone between him and Suzanne on May 21st. It's quite interesting. 11 days, now I'm not quite sure if that means that 11 days later he admitted to deleting texts or whether he deleted texts 11 days later. I think the logical thing to assume, but I'm just saying I don't know for sure. I think the logical thing to assume is that he admitted to doing it 11 days later, that the texts were actually deleted on a different day. So let me just read the quote again. Barry admitted to deleting texts on his phone between him and Suzanne on May 21 after the police investigation had begun. Agent Johnny Grusing told the court that he claimed to have done so to avoid hurting his daughters, Mallory and Macy. In other words, that he deleted the text to protect his children. But if you think about it, even Melinda deleted a text. So who do you think that was to protect? Who do you think that was to avoid hurting? One of the texts he deleted was unearthed in July 2020 and read, "I'm done." Now, I find that absolutely incredible, is that the entire, bear in mind, this happened on May 10th, so you've got about 2 weeks that pass in May, right? 3 weeks, 3 weeks, and then the entire month of June passes, and it's only in July that they find this text. So it does take a little bit of time to go to, first of all, retrieve the information and then go through it and contextualize it. And that may be a factor in the Summer Wells case. They may be going through texts and trying to find and cross-reference timelines. And if you bear in mind, we're at like day 75 in the Summer Wells case, well, it's essentially just less than 3 months into her disappearance. Well, this text was unearthed in July. It's around about 2.5 months have passed, and it kind of gives you a sense of, is that how long law enforcement needs to do this sort of forensic analysis? So when Suzanne said, "I'm done," when the law enforcement found that text, he's confronted him with the text, and he said she wouldn't have left because she loved her family too much. Let me read that again. Police confronted him with a text saying, "I'm done," but he said she wouldn't have left, Suzanne wouldn't have left because she loved her family too much. So what do you guys think of that? I don't know whether she loved Barry that much. Like, I don't know if she was staying for Barry, if you would include Barry in the family, or would you say that if it's true that she loved her family too much, was it the girls? I also wonder if there isn't some truth in what he's saying, that Suzanne was struggling to leave. So if you say Suzanne recognized the warning signs, did I say Shanann? Suzanne recognized the warning signs. Suzanne knew what she had to do, but what about her daughters? She doesn't want to leave her daughters. She can get out, but what about her daughters? So it's not quite as simple as just leaving. Also, her daughters are at a critical time. They're about to, graduate and go to college and that kind of thing. It's kind of a time that they sometimes need supervision and need guidance and need attention and need help in certain ways, need advice, need a mother. And so maybe that complicated what feels like a simple decision. Sonic, good to see you there. Patricia Burns, let's just see what you said there. Suzanne was starting to see that she was alone. Possibly. But even if she felt alone, she probably would have still felt that she has a job to do as a mother. I think a lot of mothers would. Al Anders says, Barry says he was Suzanne's ATM. Wasn't it the other way around, that Barry was using Suzanne as an ATM? Raymond says, did Suzanne have a weapon? I don't think so. I think Barry had quite a few, but it's probably a reasonable question to ask. if you look at the social media, she seems quite amused. She sort of pokes gentle fun at Barry as being a mountain man. You never really see her hunting with him. You never really see her, unless I haven't seen it, but you never really see her kind of, what do you call it, standing with a recently shot animal, the way Barry does. In the one photo with Barry and the bear, that's not Suzanne posing with him. So did Suzanne go hunting with him? It doesn't appear that way. I could be wrong. She was too empathetic. It does seem that way. It seems, yeah, maybe it did. Okay. Anyway, let's just keep going. We kind of just past halfway, and it's 71 minutes. So the TCRS assessment on the deleted texts, one's got to draw a distinction between crime evidence and signs of a cover-up. You want to build both cases, but also have a dividing line between both. Both matter, but the crime scene evidence matters more. The cover-up evidence shows the scale and scope of the intent. This is quite important. So what does the cover-up evidence actually help you with? Well, to the extent that you have a cover-up taking a certain length of time, certain kind of things going on. Bear in mind with the Chris Watts case, you had the secret calculator app. A lot of images and numbers and text and so on secreted away for quite a period of time. His Facebook account deleted, and so on, going all the way to the well site. The cover-up evidence shows the scale and scope of the intent, how sneaky it is, how determined the perpetrator is to cover his tracks. The I'm done text that was sent on May 6th, 3 short days before the incident, I think contextually this is extremely significant. It sketches out the actual dynamic between the couple and that emotionally things were likely coming to a head as Mother's Day approached. Now, bear in mind, Barry says, she would never have left her family, but saying I'm done doesn't really jive with that, right? Bear in mind, she'd also text certain things. We're not completely sure what she said, but it seems like, in summary, what she said to her sister was, I'm done. It seems like she was in the end game in terms of what she said to Jeff. So these are potentially 3 different people that she's communicated to her intentions. And I think her intentions were there for quite a long time. She was unhappy for quite a long time. But in May, things were going up a gear. April, May, things were increasing in intensity. Donald Duck says, I filed for divorce earlier this year, but it had to be dismissed because of the incorrect paperwork. My husband and his mom said if I refile, they will use my mental illness and trauma against me. Shame, that's sad to hear. So Donald Duck's in a situation of almost like being held captive. Why do you think they don't want you to divorce? Like, what do you think is the primary reason for that? Surely, if you want to leave, how is it a good situation all round? So how does it benefit them that you don't leave, if you don't mind sharing? Valvoul says they want control and not to lose financially. Makes them look good. I think appearances are also important. Appearances can be important for both people as well. You're getting some support here, Donald. Someone says, take care. Okay, so let me just try and complete this point. I do wonder whether Barry told his daughters one thing, perhaps that he suspected that their mother ran off and took money. Like we don't know exactly what Barry told Mallory and Macy, but what we do know is that they seem to support him. In other words, they believe him, I would suspect. If they support him, isn't it that they have been given a version of events that they think make him look innocent? And so the fact that both of them support him is quite a good look for Barry. That the people very close to him and Suzanne feel that they still want to support Barry. Thunder and lightning here. I hope you're staying safe, Grandma Green. So it is interesting. One would want to know, what did Barry tell his daughter and what did he tell the police? If he said, did he say to the police, it's a question, did Barry say to the police she would never run off, and so she had to have been taken either by a mountain lion or someone driving down the road, right? So, but what did he say to his daughters? Did he say to his daughters, your mother was doing this, doing that, I think she ran off, maybe she ran off with this other guy? Is the story told to the law enforcement and the daughters the same thing? That would just be interesting to know. Donald Duck says, 3 of my kids are on the autism spectrum and my husband quit his job. So are you employed? Is he using you as an ATM? Yeah. Not good. I think a lot of these cases do bring up, they sort of resonate with other people in the same situation. So in terms of intertextuality, deleted text, particularly around the time of an incident, are a serious red flag. It's not necessarily a smoking gun. Consider that Suzanne's sister Melinda also deleted the last text Suzanne sent to her. So deleting text doesn't automatically bestow guilt, but it's not a good look. Of course, we're not just talking about one deleted text here, but a whole archive. As I said, we see the same pattern in the Chris Watts case as well as the Oscar Pistorius case. If Barry deleted text, what was he trying to hide? Marital discord, an affair, but also the emotionally charged responses to all this, question mark. So if he deleted the text, what reason could there be for this? In one of those messages, Barry was so unhinged by what was happening, we know what he did. He threatened to take himself out. So Barry's emotional reactivity, his personality, are also an important dimension to this case. Deleting the text hides away this dimension. And Barry can then control the narrative to say that he loved his wife, she loved him, and he has no idea what happened. That's one interpretation. Now we go to the debris in the fireplace that I've listed below the deleted calls. If the laundry narrative is vitally important to investigate at any crime scene, the disposal narrative is almost as important. Evidence can be cleaned, washed, or wiped away, be destroyed. Whoa, sorry about that. I haven't eaten for a while, so I've got some rumblings. Typically, water or fire are 2 ways to destroy evidence. The problem with a fluid is that it indicates proof that something is or was wet, and often with a smell associated with a fluid. The problem with a fire is even if it destroys evidence, tiny traces or artifacts often linger. So although water/a fluid and fire are effective in terms of disposal, The problem is that they leave behind evidence of themselves. In other words, water or fluid leaves behind dampness. Fire leaves behind evidence of fire, whether it's scoring, whether it's smoke, whether it's seeing flames from a distance away in the middle of the night or whatever. In the Stephen Avery case, there was this big bonfire, I think the night before, and lots of people saw it. And then the next day you see the burn pit. So anyway, in terms of the TCRS assessment, hang on, I've got quite an important thing to deal with here. The problem with fire is even if it destroys evidence, tiny traces or artifacts often linger. I want to show you this dog. You're not going to look at how he's sleeping. Look at this. Look at those feet in the air. Anyway, that's now a very comfortable dog that feels loved and just absolutely relaxed, perhaps spoiled, yes. So another quote from the article, this is something that I actually missed in terms of the testimony. I'm not sure if you guys caught it. Police said they found remnants of a piece of lacquered wood in the fireplace at the Morphew home, despite a stack of firewood nearby. Also found in the fireplace were the remains of burned documents and books. Police had been told Suzanne always kept a Bible and a journal by her bed. They found the Bible but didn't find the journal. The part that I think one's got to underline here is the remnants of a piece of lacquered wood, right? LACQUERED, right? So the TCRS assessment of this, it's difficult to know what to make of the lacquered wood. Was it a weapon, or was it covered in, some kind of something from a human being? Was it something that was used to bludgeon or something? Was it something that these books were placed inside of? Was it something else? Was it some kind of ornament? So one would want to know what the lacquered wood originally was. Again, you probably only know the answer to ask someone who lived in that home. The burning of documents and books is likely meant to conceal where Suzanne's mind was, and perhaps also hide away the financial predicament Barry found himself in at the time. Now consider a scenario in which Suzanne disappeared and Barry was innocent. Why would he burn a lacquered piece of wood and arbitrary books and papers in the middle of searching for his wife? So I think the prosecution can also play the defense case, can kind of invert it and say, okay, if Barry's innocent, why would he burn the wood and the books and the papers in the middle of when he should be searching for his wife? Why would he do that? Have you got an explanation for that? And they might say, no, it happened earlier, or maybe Suzanne burnt it. Maybe Suzanne burnt her own stuff. She was planning on leaving and she wanted to travel light. The presence of a nearby stack of firewood indicates to me that what was incinerated wasn't for functional purposes. It wasn't meant to heat the place. Rather, the fire was meant to destroy evidence at a critical time. In terms of intertextuality, in the Big Tracy case, 5 or 6 garbage bags filled with toys that were spattered and rags and tissue wipes and clothing, they were all incinerated as well. In the Chris Watts case, Watts barbecued in the hours prior to his wife returning home. What I've always thought he could have done then was he could have burnt things like bank statements and bills and that sort of thing. He could have. Whether he did or not, we're not sure. But there is a fire in the middle of the Chris Watts crime scene. Is it relevant? Well, it could be. What's also disposed of evidence like blankies and possibly clothing at a dumpster on Black Mesa Drive. Then the chlorine smell at the Holiday Inn, you might say, wow, I would have put that at number 2, or, I would have put it much higher. The reason it's at number 7 is because it's at what I would call a secondary crime scene, or possibly a secondary crime scene, right? The central crime scene is always the most important, where the crime happened. The disposal site, so if you find human remains, I would say that is often equivalently significant. But if you have a intermediate area, it's I think of secondary significance. Just the way my mind works, you don't have to go along with it. So it feels like there may be 2 or 3 crime scenes in this case. Bear in mind the vehicle can also play the role as a transit crime scene, as a kind of a sort of a temporary scene. The Morphew home as well as the Holiday Inn could be part of the crime scene fabric. Probably of the 2, the Morphew home is more important. It's unfortunate that the cops didn't swab down the hotel room for DNA. It's a little disappointing that apparently it took the cops some time to find out where Barry actually was on May 10th. Do you remember that the early version that we got was that Barry went to do kind of a volunteer firefighting class or something in Denver? Remember, that was the first story that we heard. I don't know whether the police actually accepted that, took it at face value. Did they follow that up? If they did follow it up, was there someone who sort of said something that wasn't true, and people took that at face value and only realized later on that there was a different story? But it does seem that it took a while to figure out where Barry really went. So according to the article, quote, Barry had a job in Broomfield, Colorado on May 11th, that's the Monday, and was due to collect employee Morgan Gentile at 5:30 p.m. on May 10th. That's also quite interesting that he was supposed to pick her up on the day or the night after Suzanne disappeared, right? And I think this is assuming that Suzanne wouldn't be reported to anyone that particular night or day, right? So that was when you're supposed to pick up Morgan Gentile. It's also, I think, a little bit odd that he would pick her up. She should be working on Monday morning. Why would you kind of pitch up for work on Sunday afternoon? It's even fairly on the Sunday afternoon. Maybe one's overthinking it, but it's probably just worth bearing in mind. I don't know whether Morgan Gentile lived far away from Broomfield that she'd needed to travel in, but it seems like, wow, do you really want to get an extremely early start for Monday? Is this a very important job? Can you hear my dog sleeping? Seems when I stop talking, it doesn't sleep quite as soundly. So the other thing that I think is quite interesting is Jeffrey Puckett. Jeff Puckett, I don't know if he arrived, wasn't he supposed to be picked up as well? Wasn't he supposed to work on the job as well? So why is it one arrangement for Morgan and another one for Jeff? I just think it's questions worth pondering. Let me see if you can hear the snoring now. Whenever I stop talking, he stops snoring. Anyway, according to Gentile and co-worker Jeff Puckett, Barry left the room reeking of chlorine and littered with wet towels. What's the significance of that? Anyway, the TCRS assessment, that's the end of the quote. TCRS assessment, I think this may be indicative of possibly DNA that needed to be cleaned, perhaps off field dressing tools, clothing, containers, and so on. In terms of intertextuality, in the Frazee case, Crystal Kenny successfully cleaned up Kelsey Barrett's lounge to the extent that cadaver dogs weren't able to pick up anything that's in the lounge. In the Watts case, Officer Lyons noticed the strong smell of bleach and vacuum lines in the carpet. Bear in mind, I don't think anyone else noticed the smell of bleach, only Officer Lyons. I don't know if people noticed it but didn't say anything, but Officer Lyons certainly made note of it. If Barry Morphew is innocent, it seems like a particularly odd thing to be doing on May 10th, almost immediately after his wife goes missing. In other words, the same day that his wife disappears, there's suddenly all of this bleach and cleaning towels, and what's that all about? It just seems a bit strange. Can you say that Barry just took a shower? Why are there so many towels lying around? Was it a very hot day? Was he doing laundry at the hotel? What's that all about? And then, like Chris Watts, Morphew seems to be using the argument that I was at work as an alibi, which I think is quite interesting. Now we get to number 8, 5 trash runs that we know of. So I think it's quite important to stress there could have been more. A quote from the article: Barry was repeatedly caught stopping as he made his way to Broomfield to dispose of trash, including at a McDonald's and at a dumpster outside a men's warehouse where he purchased a new outfit. That's also quite interesting to bear in mind that during this whole thing, he actually bought something. He bought clothing at a men's warehouse. If he bought, I wonder whether it means he disposed of other clothing that may have gotten spoiled. Or anyway, he had claimed to be tidying his truck, but when he arrived at the Morphew home on May 10th, police said his truck was still filled with clutter and bits of trash and showed photos to prove it. So the police could prove that his truck was cluttered and untidy and possibly dirty. And his story was that he went to all of these trash sites because he was cleaning up his truck. Well, his truck was still pretty dirty at the end of it, still pretty cluttered at the end of it. The TCRS assessment, within the context of a murder investigation, a single lie, a single inconsistency can be a huge problem. If we knew nothing else, if there's no other evidence except that Barry had stopped all over the place to dispose of trash from his truck, that's according to him, only for it to emerge that his truck was still cluttered, it would be natural to be suspicious, wouldn't it? This alone wouldn't meet the standards for probable cause, but it would raise a few red flags. So once again, this on its own, it wouldn't be enough to take you anywhere in this particular case. I mean, some people do drop off trash. I don't know why you would do it in 5 different places, though, but some people do, it doesn't necessarily mean something's happening. The timing of it, though, is odd, that it was that day. Do you agree? I also think Barry's untidy truck says something about the real Barry. He seems to be a disorganized person to some extent. Is he? I don't know. But according to this, it feels like he might be. Maybe he's a disorganized thinker. Maybe, unlike Chris Watts, cleaning up after himself isn't his strong suit. I mean, do you agree that Chris Watts did quite a good job of cleaning up after himself, just generally? The chlorine and the mess left behind in the hotel room doesn't seem to be a very good job in cleaning. It's also possible that the whole thing at the hotel is a misdirection, that it's saying, hey, look here. And so you sort of look at the hotel room, but there's nothing to look at. That's possible. Is it likely? It's difficult to say. Intertextuality, Barry, like Don Wells, seems to have an answer for everything. So when he's confronted, he's got a ready explanation. Is the explanation sufficient? Question mark. On the strength of his character and perhaps due to an intimidation factor, he's possibly gotten away with half-baked explanations in the past. That's something one can check up on. Has Barry often been in situations like this, and is, how can I put it, he's kind of got the gift of the gab, is able to be quite convincing. I do think he was fairly convincing in the Sermon in the Forest. Not absolutely convincing, but I think more convincing than Chris Watts was, a lot more convincing than Chris Watts was. And I also think the question is, has he convinced his daughters? And I think the answer is his family support him. So I think he's quite convincing, right? I think he's quite charming. And he's got a character that he can rely on that kind of stands him in good stead, right? But I also think if you disagree with Barry, then what's going to happen? And you've heard journalists sort of disagreeing with him. There's been a little bit of banter that was recorded where Barry does seem to get a little bit upset when certain things happen. What happens if you do disagree with him? So what you do quite often see in the true crime fabric is when somebody opposes somebody else, when somebody disagrees with someone, they simply learn to go along with it because they find there's just too much drama to actually stand up to somebody. And so the person that is benefiting from that may get a false sense of security that they can get away with things, that they have gotten away with things. The difference is in a murder investigation that doesn't wash. A police officer or an FBI agent isn't going to be trying to stay in your good books, even though it might appear that way, such as happened in the Chris Watts case. They're not going to be too tentative asking questions. They are going to ask questions. They are going to confront. And no matter what your reputation in the past, it's not going to, I'm not going to say it's not going to have an impact at all. I think in the O.J. Simpson case, some people couldn't get past the legend of O.J. Simpson. So that it can have a lingering effect. Now we go to Dear Discrepancies. This is number 9. Again, this is also from the Daily Mail. I'm quoting from the article, quote, Barrier said he followed the elk because he was hoping to see where they stopped, and so he could collect fallen horns. But police said deer don't shed their horns in May, and that it would have been pitch black at 5 a.m. that day. So the impression I get is Barry, for whatever reason, was up early on the morning of May 10th, and he was kind of in his garage, and the door, I guess, was open. And then, lo and behold, an elk passed by, and he wanted to collect the horns of the elk, and he was going to remove, I guess, the horns of the elk or something like that. And as I've said earlier, I think talk about elk and deer is kind of code for Suzanne, isn't it? Could it be? Police also disputed his story about his tranquilizer to stun a deer in April. So this is again quoting from the article. Police disputed his story about using his tranquilizer, I think it should be tranquilizer gun, to stun a deer in April to cut the horns off. No cut horns were found in the Morphew home, meaning none of the horns were sort of like branches removed from the sort of base plate. I think one of the journalists also mentioned that they didn't find any antlers that were any examples of antlers of that kind. I think it was Lauren Schaaf who said, although Barry's given this explanation, they didn't find any antlers such as the ones that he's describing. Police all listen to this dog. And then he stops. It's crazy. So the no cut horns were found in the Morphew home, and Rorich pointed out that deer don't grow until much later in the year. TCRS assessment, if you're inclined to think the dart theory is unlikely, well, why does Barry protesteth too much about it? So if you say the dart theory is unlikely, why is there so much sort of about this? It's not that Barry says, I was just checking the darts I was going hunting the next week. It's this big story about it, and that plays out that day. Barry's explanation doesn't seem to be particularly believable, and I don't know, I kind of get the sense that he kind of gets caught out here by the fact that someone has actually checked up on what he said. Someone has actually gotten expert knowledge on this and found that what he's saying isn't necessarily true. You kind of get the sense that does Barry say things, but he doesn't expect people to check on what he's saying. He expects people to believe him based on the strength of his character, ? I'm no hunter, but I thought it sounded unlikely that a hunter would prune the antlers off, because you want to keep them on that plate so that you can display them. It just sounded unlikely that someone would prune the antlers off, like cutting off branches. And apparently no antlers were found in the residence that weren't attached to the bone. So why would Barry lie about hunting if he had nothing to hide? So, if he had nothing to hide, why is he lying about it? Conversely, if he does have something to hide, what is he hiding? I think it is also easier to manipulate someone, to tell someone something that isn't true if they like you, if they love you. They want to believe you, they like, what you're saying, they like you. So it might be easy to do that. Intertextuality, in the Chris Watts case, Watts changed the time he woke up and spoke to Shanann from 5 a.m. to 4 a.m. That's quite a significant departure. Tailoring a version of events is one thing, but tailoring it in a way that makes no sense. Why does that happen? Is that a sign of culpability? Why would Chris Watts wake Shanann up early after just 2 hours sleep? There's an example of that. Tailoring that makes no sense, indicative of culpability. Why would Chris Watts wake Shanann up early after just 2 hours sleep for her to have a conversation they'd already had? Suspicious? Well, in that case, yes. And then number 10, bullet by the bed. I've listed this as the 10th most damning piece of evidence, but you could theoretically have it as number 1 or 2, depending on how you see the scenario. According to the article, Rorich testified that a .2 caliber round was found on the floor of Suzanne Morphew's bedroom, so the master bedroom, next to her side of the bed. Barry owns a .22 caliber pistol, which he says he uses to shoot chipmunks. I think someone raised a question earlier, that's the end of the quote. Someone raised a question earlier, does Suzanne have a gun? Well, that addresses that. Where did that bullet belong, right? And I apologize for what I'm about to say. I'm just simply saying what is a possibility given the evidence. It's possible that Suzanne was shot when the tranquilizer dart failed to take effect fast enough. So the tranquilizer dart may have been used for a silent, painless end, but there was instead a struggle to make a phone call beyond what the person who shot anticipated. So perhaps Suzanne fought off the sedation longer than was expected. And so perhaps she was shot anyway. Barry had a bunch of guns, was a good hunter. I think there were quite a few guns in the residence. Barry was a good hunter. Wood shooting had been a unusual experience for him. So if that is the case, if the scenario did play out, then this round is about as good as the tranquilizer dart cap in terms of evidence, right? I'm just saying it's a possibility. The TCRS assessment, it's possible the .22 caliber round is another misdirection. You'd expect there to be blood inside the bedroom if a gun was fired there. If a shot was fired, why didn't anyone hear anything? It also seems unlikely someone would accidentally leave a round like that lying around if it was used. In terms of intertextuality, stranger things have happened. Remember Chris Watts leaving the bed sheet in the open field. Also, if this had happened, I don't know, if it had happened at night, then you might have lost track of evidence, but did this happen at night? Would it happen in the afternoon? In which case, wouldn't you have seen that? Or did the bullet sort of drop and roll under something? Where exactly was it? I'm almost at the end of this, not part of this list, so not part of these 10 most damning pieces of evidence, money. There's also other evidence to mention that hasn't made this list. The $70,000 missing from the open safe. I think that is a narrative that, I don't know if it belongs in a preliminary hearing, but the financial narrative, I think, is very important to this particular story, as it was in the Chris Watts case. The financial narrative remains missing from the Chris Watts case. We still don't know how much Shanann Watts really earned. We've got an idea of the scale of the financial crater, but it's still not quite clear exactly what the financial narrative was there. We want to know what the financial narrative was in this case. We do know that Barry was lending money from Suzanne's father and that she was anxious for him to pay it back. We also want to know for how far did Barry's financial problems go back in time? Were they improving? Was he on top of them? What is the situation? Also not part of this list is the affair. Suzanne's affair with Jeff had to add an emotional charge to the events, and by removing that aspect from the equation, it becomes harder to intuit a motive. Add the affair and add Suzanne's eagerness to escape, as well as perhaps her partner's desperation to stay married. Don't you have kind of like a bomb that's rigged, something that is rigged to just explode kind of thing, emotionally? Don't you have a situation that is almost inevitable? Then there's also misdirection. I've mentioned misdirection a couple of times, that this is possibly misdirection, that's possibly misdirection. Well, what about the bicycle and the helmet? They seem totally at odds with several strange happenings in the home at strange hours. You've got a fire made with unusual materials. You've got the hot tub breaking, damage to the bedroom door, bullets and dart caps lying around where they shouldn't be. And that's besides those strange movements at the vehicle the 7 times that the door opens and closes, at 3:25 in the morning. And then there are also strange movements, not just at Salida, but also Broomfield, right? There's also Barry's identity and the family dynamic. All of this isn't really a piece of evidence. It's more part of the entire fabric of the case, but it's nevertheless important in contextualizing the evidence, in putting it in the piece of the puzzle where it needs to go, and giving texture and tone and intensity to the evidence. So in terms of Barry's identity and the family dynamic, does Barry have a controlling personality compared to Suzanne? Does Suzanne have a kind of a pliable personality? Now, what I think is quite interesting if you compare the family dynamic of Barry and Suzanne to Chris Watts and Shanann, you also have a controlling personality and a kind of a calm, reserved personality, nice guy personality. You kind of get the sense that Chris Watts had a nice guy personality, wants to be perceived in a good way. You kind of get the same from Suzanne, that she was a sweet lady, a sweet woman. She was also a nice person, right? The part that I think is important to emphasize here doesn't mean that the nice person is always going to be the perpetrator. The part to emphasize is the dynamic of a nice person and a controlling person is that can lead to enmity. And so you have nice person and controlling person when I say nice, I don't necessarily mean they are nice, that they are not confrontational, that they are perhaps quite quiet, perhaps that they are introverted, whatever, but that you have personalities that are kind of clashing in a certain way. And part of it is the person not liking to be controlled, the person who wants to escape, not liking to be controlled, and then doing something. Something happens where control shifts, if that makes sense. So I do think the actual dynamic in terms of the family dynamic is missing from the prosecution's case. Again, I don't know if it belongs in the preliminary hearing, but I do think it's probably the most important piece of the puzzle. It's also one of the most difficult to fathom. And then the final part of the list that's not part of these 10 most damning pieces of evidence, I think the most damning of all is actually Suzanne. Where is Suzanne? The fact that Suzanne remains missing, I don't think benefits Barry. You can try and make the argument, but I don't think one can argue that an absence of information constitutes an innocent explanation. So the fact that Suzanne's not here, does that show foul play, or, well, it doesn't mean anything? I know they try to play that in the Patrick Frazee case. Kelsey's not here. Doesn't mean nothing. It didn't mean anything happened to her. And I thought the prosecution did a great job in that case to say, we really wish that Kelsey could walk through these doors right now and announce herself, but that's not going to happen, and it didn't happen. And no one would be in that situation where someone is being put on trial for your murder, but you're actually sitting right out there and you're just watching it, eating popcorn, and you've got other family members at stake as well. Your mother is sitting in court, your daughters are sitting in court, your father's sitting in court, and you're going to just, and the whole thing is live. You're not going to announce that. It's possible that could happen. It's just extremely unlikely. It's just beggars belief. But you kind of had that part of the defense case. It seemed to be implied in the defense case of Patrick Frazee. Anything could have happened to Kelsey. Maybe she ran off. Okay, but then if she's out there, can't she just call in and say, guys, I'm okay. Here I am. So, the absence of information constituting an innocent explanation. In the Summer Wells case, do you think Summer is out there safe and just not bothering? She's living happily ever after somewhere. No one's seeing her, but she is out there. That is actually the narrative of the Madeleine McCann case to this day, that Madeleine is fine, she's safe, and until we know better, well, there was no foul play, and we're not going to imagine that she's no longer alive. In fact, her parents have insisted that she's alive. And she's been missing for 14 years. Normally when someone's missing for 7 years without evidence, that is when they're officially regarded as no longer with us. But I think it can be quite obvious if it's even shorter than that, especially with other evidence going along with that, such as marital discord. So the absence of information and the length of time added to the circumstances at the time of the disappearance rather point toward the likelihood of foul play and a cover-up than away from that. Do you agree with that? The same thing applies in the Summer Wells case. So in sum, each of these 10 or more pieces of evidence individually is insufficient. Let me say that again. In summation, in summary, each of these 10 or more pieces of evidence, if you take it on its own, would be insufficient. Damning, yes, but insufficiently damning to prosecute someone for murder. Bear in mind, it's not just what the evidence is, it's what you can prove. Can you prove the relevance of the damaged door? Can you prove the relevance of the dart cap? Can you prove the relevance of the missing 15 minutes? Can you prove what the wet towels and chlorine means at the hotel room? So separately, it's very difficult to take this case anywhere, but added together, even if it were only a third of the items listed, let's say the scratches, the bedroom door, and the missing 15 minutes, the door opening 7 times that morning, Barry going to work on a Sunday very early, Barry would still have a case to answer for, in my opinion. So if there was about a third of the evidence, I still think that would be quite strong. That's my opinion. The state, in my opinion, has exceeded the standard required for this case to go to trial by some margin. That is my thoughts on the subject. Stacey P says so much content. Let's look at some of your questions. Catherine Bartier says stronger evidence than in the Watts case. Then you bring in the door. It is important to bring in the door at the same time. Very true. A lot of people are saying, well, so my mods are saying head on to Patreon. I'm at 691 patrons. I wouldn't mind hitting 700 before the end of the month. That would be quite a nice milestone. I think I've been over 700 in the past. It sort of fluctuates. But one thing I am trying to do, just in terms of Patreon, is I want to get to a certain level so that I can actually visit the States and do a little bit of on-the-ground work, such as the interview room does. I don't know how good I'll do as a South African. Hi, do you want to talk about this? Where are you from? I'm not quite sure, but it's not always talking to the people at the center of the case. You can talk to. I would have liked to have spoken to some of the people in the Summer Wells case that are like the shopkeepers. Try to get them on the record. The people at Priceless and Sonic and so on. Songbird, I was on there 2 years ago. Need to go back. Songbird, you need to go back. Catherine Bhatia, don't understand missing minutes. Never heard that before. The missing minutes are the 15 minutes where he apparently drove, I think, east to the mine. Let me just make sure the name of that mine. The Garfield mine. So you can go and check that on Google Maps. That's apparently the direction he took. Again, is that a misdirection? Was he trying to make it look like he's going that way when he ended up going to Broomfield? Heather, whatever, says Donald Duck stays safe. Anna, thanks a lot for your contribution. Hey, Anna. Wanderlust, my red flag, who puts their phone on airplane mode at home? Well, I'm one of those. I definitely do. I do it when I sleep as well. I don't have my phone on airplane mode all the time, but I certainly have it on sometimes. Did Candace Senior talk? Grandma, I think you're asking, is that genuine? The Facebook correspondence, I believe it is. On the other channel, she actually shows, clicking on Grandma's profile, you can actually see Grandma's profile picture and the dates. That's good enough for me. Shasha, on the topic of the ATM machine, Barry controlled all the money. Interesting. Money is often a big source of control and kind of arguments. It's a bone of contention in a marriage. And money is a way to control someone, unfortunately. Contentious, yeah. Jackie Wilson says, dinner time, catch you on the replay. Cheers, Jackie. I don't know if I'm going to be on for too much longer, 15 minutes maybe. Lisa says, airplane mode saves battery strength. I think the point to make is that the phone being on airplane mode when it was is this raised questions, definitely. Al Anders says Barry just bought an $80,000 truck. Now just think about that. $70,000 goes missing, $80,000 truck. Interesting. Donald Duck says, sorry if my story triggered anyone. I don't want to trauma dump, so I apologize. Thank you for all the love and support. Yeah, what's got to be careful, if everybody shares I can do the same as well. If everybody shares their story, but we do feel for you, and you did raise quite an interesting point there of being a captive in your own marriage. And I think one of the ways that can happen is if you're employed and no one else is. I think that can be a reason. I think it was a reason in the Chris Watts case. Chris Watts is effectively employed. Was Shanann kind of thing. I think it would have helped Suzanne if she had a job. Bear in mind that she had a cancer, problem, but if she had a job that could have taken her out the home and she may have felt more independent, if that makes sense. Raymond says it needs to be heard. Lisa discovers, was there life insurance involved here? Sure. I'm trying to think whether it came up. I'm going to say I'm not sure. I don't know. I'm not sure if, I know there was a discussion, I think, with Jean with Suzanne's father, where there was power of attorney, I think, that needed to be transferred. Sageti Nona says, Suzanne had a charity or foundation. Was that just to protect assets? Good question. But the financial narrative is definitely something that I hope the prosecutors are going to, focus on and get answers to. Jeremy Bryan says they found no blood. If she was shot, they would have found blood with luminol. Yes, I agree with that. But in the Kelsey Bereth case, you had a very brutal, violent killing with a baseball bat, actually, and they actually found no blood initially, and that was a bloodbath. Apologize for the visual, but they had cadaver dogs there. They didn't find anything, and the mistress actually came in afterwards and said, no, it did happen here. I cleaned it up. I spent hours and hours cleaning it up. I filled up 5-6 garbage bags, and when they tore up the planks of the lounge, they actually found that a little bit of blood that hadn't been cleaned away had seeped through the cracks in the wood. So it is possible that you can clean something like that up. Is it likely? No. So at this point, it doesn't seem likely that happened. I do think the nature of the hunting and so on, I don't know whether this would have been a very clean execution somehow. Raymond, the money was gone. I thought $70,000 was taken from the safe. The Aqua Adventurer, hi host, new to your channel, first time in here, hello. Hi Aqua Adventurer, thanks for subscribing. Well, I see there's 500 of you guys still watching. If there are 500 of you that are watching, can you give this video a like? Let's see if we can get to 500 likes. Louise says his neighbor said there was a lot of machinery noise during the night. I think you're talking about the neighbor at the Riverside property. Stephanie says, please don't mention other channels' names. Yeah, we don't like to do that. Nick Q, the hypocrisy of these people being fully paid up members of, yeah. Nick makes quite a good point that Barry seems to invoke God quite a lot. Well, so did Don Wells, or Don Wells has been doing that, and so has Chris Watts. They've all of them are, and so, what do you make of that? I'm curious to know if the girls going to camp was a thing they did often. That's quite an interesting point, because I think you've got to think about this as possibly premeditated, and also if it was, then you need this opportunity. So when was it decided they were going to go? Were they always going to go away at this camp? And bear in mind, it's Mother's Day. Does that indicate that they didn't get along with their mother so well, or that both parents supported them in their faith? It would just be interesting to know that. Wanderlust says, my kiddos go to 1 week camp at the same time every year. It's a thing. Probably was announced well in advance. These church camps usually are. They announce it quite far in advance that we're having this camp. And by the way, I think they do drive past or sort of in the area of the Laurie Vallow case to get to this camp. I think it was in Idaho, which I think is quite interesting. Catherine Bartier says the neighbor heard a machine noise for 30 minutes. He was building the dam, 7 trips. This was at a different property. Barry was working at night on I think it was close to midnight, and they did actually check that property and didn't find anything there. So one's also going to ask, what's the relevance of that? Was that misdirection? What is that all about? Kathy says Barry's a lifelong Christian Don on new converts. Yeah. Loris Warenko, thanks for that, Loris. Who do you think will be called for prosecution witnesses who could provide testimony in defense of Suzanne? Well, I think the neighbor. Suzanne was at the neighbor. It's a great question. I think the neighbor, where Suzanne went to the neighbor when she sent the "I'm done" text. So I don't know whether Suzanne confided in the neighbor much. I also think Melinda will probably be called, also Andy. So family members of Suzanne, possibly some of the hospital staff. She was getting cancer treatments. I think there's a hospital patient that she was treated next to. So people that kind of knew her. But I think, family members. I think the question is also, will the daughters testify and for whom? That'll be definitely interesting to see. Just think about George and Cindy Anthony and how they testified in terms of the Casey Anthony trial. K.A. Myrie says life insurance hasn't come up. Twin Mom, so happy to have found this channel. Thanks, Twin Mom. Thanks for that. Catherine Bartier says, right on, Suzanne is the deer, the elk, and the chipmunks. Makes you kind of think of Snow White in that sense, being with the animals in a way, kind of thing. Melancholy says, nobody can testify for Suzanne since she has had a secret life. Well, Jeff probably will testify if there's a trial. Jeff, I would imagine, will be called back again. I'm just trying to think. You might also have school teachers, even other school teachers that were work colleagues. The bicycle store that sold them the bicycle. I think Suzanne was a member of a gym, wasn't she? So it could be people that she encountered at gym. Church folk, the pastor, members of the congregation, they might be called to testify as well. Crime and Justice said her friend she always confided in. Was that Sheila? I'm just trying to think what that person's name was again. So someone said, is Jeff the secret boyfriend? Is the secret boyfriend the only secret boyfriend? I think Jeff is the only secret boyfriend, yeah. Yeah, Jeff spoke during the preliminary hearing, or actually, I'm not sure if he did. Did Jeff? I think that they mentioned what Jeff had said. I'm actually not sure about that. Did Jeff speak at the preliminary hearing, or did they just say? Did officers say what Jeff said? I'm not actually sure. I also thought her name was Sheila. Jeff is married, yes. K. Mitch says, I don't think he did. Heather says he didn't speak. The officers relayed what Jeff said. Yeah, that's what you get when you get these cases sort of second or third hand via tweets. I mean, you would know if you saw it, you'd know kind of immediately. Nurse Nelson, how's it going? Thanks a lot for that, Nurse Nelson. Must be quite early there. Wow, this dog my arm is starting to almost go numb. Nurse Nelson says, please shout out to my husband, Luke Newman. He loves listening to you. LOL. Okay. Luke Newman, good to have you out there. It's good to, there are a lot of ladies in the true crime community. It's always good to have a couple of guys as well. Not saying it's only ladies. There are definitely some men that are regulars here as well. But hopefully Luke Newman's going to become a regular as well. Anna says, my husband is listening too. Okay. Are husbands listening because they want to listen or because they have to listen? Are they just happening to be listening? Amber Griff says, I could listen to you all night. LOL. Well, I'm not going to be on here for more than another about 10 minutes. Signona says, many more men lately. I think the addition of the Summer Wells case has definitely brought certain newcomers into the true crime community. Oh, we almost at 400 likes. Thanks for that. At times when you really care, you have no voice. Okay. Raymond says hi to Luke Newman. Okay. I almost missed this. Janae Ann, good to see you here. Didn't know we were going live tonight. Okay, I did put up a couple of things here and there. I do normally let you guys know in advance on Twitter. My husband turned on jazz to drown you out. Okay, that's interesting. So I might be doing a live tomorrow on the Summer Wells case Q&A. To be honest, I think the odds are I'm not going to be doing it. We'll see if anything happens between today and tomorrow. But yeah, I am going to be doing the final episode on the Sermon on the Mount, the statement analysis there. And then if there's anything else I want to address, I might do it in a live, but somehow I think there's not going to be one. But we'll see if something happens this weekend, there might be a live. Lisa Discover says, make sure you've subscribed. Stephanie says, I enjoy hearing male and female perspectives. That's one thing that I've definitely noticed in true crime is men and women have got different perspectives on men and women. I think women can be quite severe on other women sometimes. And yeah. I don't know whether it's a case that men are severe on other men. I'm not sure. In a lot of true crime cases, men tend to be guilty. So, I don't know whether you can be severe enough on, whether men can be severe enough on other men, but it's almost like a given that, like in the Chris Watts case, who was the most likely to have committed this crime? Chris Watts. If anything, there's been a lack of disdain for Chris Watts, I think. In the Patrick Frazee case, almost nothing, given the shocking thing that he did there, Patrick Frazee. Contessa says, my son's listening because he thinks I'm crazy. Okay. Janae Ann says, I'm most severe on men. I give women the benefit of the doubt usually. I just watched a really interesting movie today, Bombshell, dealing with Megyn Kelly and Gretchen, and that whole story surrounding that debacle at Fox News. I actually seen the movie a long time earlier. I thought Charlize Theron was excellent in that. I don't know what you guys thought. South African actress, one of the top actresses in Hollywood, I think. What was really interesting was obviously based on a true story, but how the women need to decide there. Are they going to support one another, or are they going to kind of support themselves? And some of it was supporting one another in defending Roger Ailes. Now, I'm not here to defend anyone or take any kind of position, just to say it was quite interesting in that movie seeing the dilemma women found themselves in. It wasn't as straightforward as just coming forward. And there were consequences to that as well, which I don't know if that applies as much with men in that situation. It just seems a bit... True Crime Wifey says, Bombshell is a great movie. Margot Robbie in it too. I thought Margot Robbie did she acted really, really well, really moving. Also, sorry to say, I thought she looked quite stunning in that as well. Charlize in Monster was incredible. Yeah, it's amazing how she could transform herself. It's called Bombshell. It's about the events at Fox News. Jeffrey Richards, Nick's voice is very sleep conducive for man and beast. Yeah, I think Timmy feels the same way. Jacqueline says, I do not believe that was Candace Horror. Okay, I do. There's actually a moment in the video from the other channel where she clicks on the profile and just shows everything in one go. If you think that's contrived, I just think it's unlikely, but my husband isn't into true crime, but your videos are some of the only videos he listens in on. That's a compliment. He likes how you say children. Yeah, I suppose I'm supposed to say children, but to me that sounds a bit like Forrest Gump. Did you bring your children? Children, children. The D is silent. I actually saw Tom Hanks on a show saying how he came up with the Forrest Gump accent. He was actually talking to that little boy, and he just said it was making the G's stand out, hanging. And I found that quite fascinating. Alina Wolf, she did a great job on the video with the messages. I agree. I thought it was the grandmother. Yeah, she did do a good job. I think it's very interesting, the word historical, where she said, when Candace supposedly came out of the basement knowing what had happened, she was historical. I think that is true, that Candace may well have been hysterical. We don't get the sense from her, but I think Candace can be quite emotional. And if something did happen, and I think it happened at the swimming hole, maybe Candace was hysterical. And then that period passes, where I guess it sinks in, right? Christina says, can you speak Afrikaans? Yes, I can. I thought grandma was in her camper. Good point. I did think grandma sounded authentic. Good point. What's also quite interesting, sorry to come back to the Bombshell movie, is Megyn Kelly was, in the movie, was kind of, her character was sort of said as to be authentic. She's not someone afraid to say what she thought. And she's now gone independent. She's not part of a channel. And that's kind of been what True Crime Rocket Science has been all along. I've never been affiliated with a magazine or anything. I've written for magazines. I've published books, but I've never been under a publisher's sort of stick. And that's allowed me to say my mind and be authentic, Le Petit says, what does Afrikaans sound like? So if I translate that question, what does Afrikaans sound like? Hoe klink Afrikaans? It sounds a bit like German, I guess. Sounds a bit like Dutch. This reminds me of the O.J. Simpson case, Total Control. Catherine says, you're so right, the dart was just a means to the deed. He could have given a heavy, that's also possible. One's got to look at the personality and character of the person, and I think in this case it's someone who's quite athletic, quite physical. Bear in mind in the Chris Watts case, Chris Watts was jogging and doing weights, and so the idea of him wrestling and running is kind of also likely. If you think about the weights and then the thief hatches, there's also this idea of effort that's involved. I like Spanish. That is a good language. I think I'm going to be on another 2 minutes, then I'm going to be out of here. I've got to eat, and I think my dog also wants to get going. I just want to thank my mods, Stacey P, Sharon, Stephanie. I don't know if Jean made it, but thank you to the mods for making it. Bria, thank you also for being here. Laurel Chisholm has just joined us in time to make the last minute. Songbird says Barry was very strong. Barry was also kind of a guy who seemed to work out quite a lot. Anna says your voice is very soothing. Listening while doing housework and chores. I hear that quite a lot. Nurse Nelson says, thank you for your time. Good to have you here, Nurse Nelson. So thanks to the mods. Thanks for all those who have done their super chats. Let's just get Timmy out of here. Actually, I can't get him out of here. Timmy, come. Let me just show him to you guys. Okay, here's Timmy. Timmy, are you hungry? Huh? Do you know you were snoring? He definitely needs a haircut and a bath. But just waiting for it to get a little bit warmer, because to bath him now, he'll probably shiver the whole night. Yeah, he is a handsome dog, I must say. Compared to other schnauzers, he's definitely a good-looking little guy. True Crime Wifey, thanks for all your hard work. So, yeah, thanks for everyone who participated. Thanks, guys, for making it. If you want to join Patreon, it's $1 a month. Quite a lot of content put up every day. I do put up advanced releases for a lot of what appears on YouTube. Really good group there as well. Yeah, so the other thing I think to mention is that we're going to find out about the Judge Patrick Murphy's decision on this case in September. Is it the 7th of September or the 14th? Does anyone know? It's early September. We're going to find out what is going to happen. I do think the Laurie Vallow case, certainly Chad Daybell, has been postponed again, so likely only to be heard, I think, next year, the 17th, that's right, 17th. So about 3 weeks to go before we'll have certainty on the Barry Morphew case. Sharon Tuck has put up the link there for Teespring if you guys want to buy merch, such as Intertextuality t-shirts. I won't guarantee it, but I can tell you if you wear that shirt with that word, people are going to be like, what is intertextuality? And then there's a nice kind of response to that thought question on the back, which I think is quite clever, quite funny. Fairy Queen says, makes a lot more sense considering, yeah, I think that's a good point. Okay, guys, thanks everyone for being here. Mods, again, thanks very much. Thanks for the super chats. And guys, you must stay safe, those of you in Texas and Louisiana. Bria says, I will wear it in France. True Crime Wifey says, several of your books are available on Amazon Unlimited. That's true. Also in paperback, some of them. Amber says, I'm totally buying the merch. Sounds good. I love you have goal sizes. I do. Okay. Is Patreon books? And there are audiobooks on Patreon that I narrate. So there are 19 audiobooks on Patreon, and I'm currently busy with the 20th. Okay, guys, thanks a lot for being here, and I'll see you guys next time. Have a good weekend.